And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Ryan and I back to recap Survivor Season 45, Episode 12, and preview the Survivor 45 finale, which will be on Wednesday. How are you doing, Ryan?
Dylan, I'm doing great. I say this every season. I can't believe we're almost at the end. I always get very sad when a Survivor season ends. Not as sad and upset as Drew was at the helicopter drive-by, but no. I think it's been a fun season. I'm looking forward to diving into this penultimate episode, looking ahead to the finale, and just kind of going over everything.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I think now one of the things we can talk about here is we called exactly what was going to happen this episode. And I know it wasn't like the most out there type thing, but we went through last week. We said that Austin and Dee could be presented the same situation this week, but the opposite way, where Dee has to decide whether or not to tell Austin about the plan, and as a result, either Austin's going to be very hurt, or the same exact thing is going to happen the opposite way. And Dee did what Austin couldn't do, didn't tell Austin, and Drew ends up going home. I thought for a second that Austin was going to play his idol on Drew anyway, just in case. Especially with the little pause he had, that would have been unbelievable. But didn't happen. Austin plays the idol on himself, and now the two idols that he had go to absolutely no use. And each time he looks pretty terrible. And now you have Dee sitting here who just kind of betrayed Austin and didn't tell him the plan. So what was your thoughts on how everything went down with Tribal Council? Drew gets voted out. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Dee and Julie won the war. They won the Reba Civil War. We've been saying for weeks, when are they going to fracture? There was a chance they could have been the Final Four, Dylan. We were seeing a pagonging happen when Kelly, Kendra, and Bruce all went out back to back to back, and then we also lose Caleb and Emily. So it really was a pagonging for anybody not named Reba. So we were thinking the whole time, are they going to fracture before Final Four, and who will win the war? Because it seems very clear that it was Drew and Austin versus Dee and Julie. And Dee and Julie won. I give massive credit to Dee. I think this was a great move to really take out Drew, weaken Austin, and Dylan, we're going to have a serious conversation. We've been talking off stream also with some of our friends and your brother, and we've been saying Dee's going to be in that conversation if she wins, not only the best new era winner, but in terms of new player seasons, up there in terms of recent winners as well, because this was a very cold, ruthless move by Dee to not return the favor that Austin gave to her. And I thought this was really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think, and we had this conversation. I'm excited to discuss if it ends up happening in future podcasts and stuff off season. Like, we were going through it. We're saying, all right, if Dee goes on to win this season, right, she's up there, not only, in my opinion, as the best new era winner, but I think you could, kind of go back and look at the 30s and say, all right, this person won this season. This person won this season. Is Dee better than that? And I think a lot of them, you're going to say yes. Like, I think that this is an incredibly impressive game that Dee is playing. I mean, you go from being able to hold together two strong number ones to the point where both of these people basically refuse to turn on you, at least up until this point. We're at Final Five right now. And she has two number ones. She's been so well insulated. She's been good enough socially to the point where she could get any information she wants from Austin, any information she wants from Julie, and she's close enough with Drew to the point where she can make him think he's not going home. Like, it's been an absolutely masterful game by Dee. But we still have the finale left to go. So I'm excited to talk about, what we think our odds are, the odds are that everybody left wins, what their paths are, and, even go dive deeper here into what happened in the episode.
I mean, Dylan, I think you said it so well, the fact that she is so insulated, because she has both Julie and Austin as her number one allies. They're kind of going for each other in some ways, although Julie's going for Drew, who's an extension of Austin, but they're not targeting her. She has two number one allies. Like you said, she's so well insulated. Katurah hasn't really been looking at her. Drew has been more focused on, Jake has been more focused, on Drew and Julie than her. She's so well protected. Every single week since the merge, she's getting out her target. I think if you want to go back to like the the Caleb Tribal Council, she was getting Caleb out there, and then she, was getting Kelly out, then Kendra, then Bruce, then Emily. So every week, Dee's gotten her target out. She's so well insulated. And then we said, Dylan, heading into this week, I remember us talking, and we said, I think the two people in the most danger are Julie and Drew, maybe Austin as the third. We never even saw Dee's name come up this week. Obviously, she won immunity, but she's been so well protected. And it's funny because if you think about the early merge, she was taking a lot of bullets. Like people were saying, oh, Dee's the biggest threat on Reba. Dee won that foot immunity challenge early on. So Dee's the biggest threat on that group. And as the weeks have gone by, it's almost like anti-New Era. Instead of her threat level keep going up, as it should, because she's playing a great game, I feel like her threat level has continued to shrink. I feel like no one's saying Dee's name. We can talk about this when we think ahead to next week. You would need to give me a crazy scenario, whether it's Jake Seidel or Julie somehow flipping, to give me any idea that Dee could be in trouble next week. She's so well protected. And I just think that is a real testament to her game, that she's been able to shrink herself as the game has gone on. It's been very impressive to watch.
Yeah, and if you look at the final five here, I even say to myself, like, I think they're going to go for Julie before Dee based on what we've heard, right? Yeah. So I think that's one of the, like, a lot of people are quick to flip on their people, like whether it be 8 or 7. And this is kind of what we spoke about with Emily. Not that she did do it, but like we were like, all right, we thought that in this season that Emily was going to be the one to make the big move on the Rebas and like break that group up. I think like a few weeks ago we were talking about this. We're like, well, is it too early to make a big move? Is it this? I think ultimately, while Emily didn't make the big move on the Rebas, she did make a big move on Bruce. So, and we saw what type of impact that had when she came back to camp. And that was, I believe, she made that vote at final 8 or final 7? Final 7 was Bruce.
What on Bruce?
Yeah, it was Bruce final 8 or final 7?
8.
8, okay. Regardless, she makes a big move at 8, and then all of a sudden she's a huge target. I give a lot of props to Dee for not being like antsy enough to make that big move that early and realize she's got the Reba 4, right? She doesn't have to necessarily make a big move. And the fact that she's kept Julie in this game and basically let Julie make the big move and then acted like she wasn't in on it, I mean, it's just balloons Julie's threat level to even more than it was. People were saying before that move that Mama J needs to go. I mean, obviously they tried to vote her out at that tribal council that she used the idol. They couldn't get her out. She's still sitting there right now. Drew goes instead of her. And they're all sitting there right now and saying, you know what? If Julie wins immunity here, then she's at least going to fire. And if she doesn't win immunity here, we need to make sure that Julie does not have a chance to make fire to get into the final 3. Because if she does, then it's a wrap. Like, I think that's truly the perception of people out there. And as a result, you have people out there saying crazy stuff like Drew's like, I think Dee's threat level is getting lower. And we're all looking, what are you talking about? So this is why I think this game by Dee has been unbelievable so far. Like it's really been good. But again, if you look to the final 5 here, what is this going to take for Dee to get voted out? It's going to take Jake recognizing that Dee is a bigger threat than Julie. And I don't think that he's going to recognize that. But you could even think about it, like, it's probably going to take a few other things as well. Like, I think that if you have to keep in mind the track record of the New Era, usually there's an idol re-hidden at 5 or some kind of big advantage, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think there's going to be an idol re-hidden at 5 here because somebody just found one at 6. But you have to, but all those players out there are going to figure that somebody has an idol, right? They're going to say, you know what, Austin's played these idols. The idol is definitely back in the play at 5 or, something, whatever. They're going to figure that there's an idol in place somewhere, which there is. Now, I think, if we bring all this back to Dee, and if it's possible for Dee to go at 5, it's not only going to take Jake recognizing that, like, maybe he gives his idol to Julie. Maybe he realizes Dee's the biggest threat. Like, that's one big step to it. The other big step is Austin and Katurah going to turn on Dee? And I don't know if that's true. And again, let's just say that Austin and Katurah are still tight with Dee, right? And it would be a 3-2. Okay. First of all, Jake has to figure out, all right, if I play my idol to save Julie, it could work. But what if, I I don't know. I feel like I feel like there's just it's tough. They'd have to like there's also a way that like
Yeah.
they kind of figure out a way to make sure that the idol doesn't work or Jake plays it the wrong way. So I feel like it could be tough
to me, there's only two ways that I think Dee goes out next week at Final Five. Now, listen, could she go out and fire? Sure, because fire is so unpredictable. We don't know who's going to take who. If Dee somehow gets put into fire, which I feel like is low odds, but then, she can't make the fire. We can't predict that. So we're just looking at the Final Five vote, which we can like actually predict. The most likely scenario, like you said, for Dee to get out here, because I think she's still slated for a really good Final Three spot, is like you mentioned, Jake places idol, whether it's on himself, whether it's to protect Julie and like a crazy like Natalie Anderson move, like whatever it is, Jake using his idol to get out Dee is a possible scenario. The only other like non-idol related scenario that could happen, because I thought we saw this teased not just in the preview, but also like this happened on the reward and nothing ever came of it. So remember how Katurah was like big third wheeling with like Austin and Dee, and then she was like, oh, like they're so close, they're holding hands, they're so close. Nothing ever became of that because Dee won immunity and then Austin had his idol. I wonder if Katurah, because she also had a confessional where she's like, I haven't made any big moves. Maybe she makes a move next week. Jake hasn't made any big moves. He finds an idol. We're seeing like the Bellows finally try to get like some agency. It might be a little bit too late for them. I think their winner stock is kind of low, both Jake and Katurah. But maybe these were like precursors because Jake found his idol, which he might use next. He probably will use next week. And then Katurah wants to make a move. She didn't really do anything this episode. But what if this was a teaser to be like, she goes to Julie and is like, Julie, I know Dee's been your number one. Dee saved your life. And by the way, this is why I don't think it's going to happen, because I don't think Julie, after Dee saved her life, is going to turn on her. But Katurah, she's a lawyer. She could go to Julie and say, like, Dee, I understand that you don't want to turn on Dee, Julie, but they're holding hands. They're number ones. If either of them win Final Two immunity or Final Four immunity, they're going to take each other, and then you get put into fire. So you have a 50% shot, Julie. Because I feel like Julie's pretty smart, and I feel like if you tell her you have a 50% shot of going into fire, that might make Julie go, I don't want to vote out Dee this week, but I'm going to vote for Austin instead. So I feel like that's your other chance of splitting up Dee and Austin, is either with Jake's idol or Katurah using the relationship to be like, you got to take one of them out at Final Five.
So yeah, that's the thing I was eventually trying to get to, and then my thought kind of like spurred away. Like, it would take the perfect scenario for Dee to basically have voted out of this game, like
or Austin, right?
I think, well, here's what I was going to say. I think it's almost more likely that Austin goes at 5 than Dee goes at 5, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we're talking about like paths for Dee to not win, in order for her to go out at 5, like she doesn't only need Jake to turn on her. She probably needs Julie to be in it. He probably needs Julie to be in on it as well. And I think Julie legitimately wants to go to the end with Dee. So I think that's going to be difficult. I think what's more likely is if Jake presents this plan to Austin, and if Jake presents this plan to Julie and says, let's get out Julie, sorry, names all mixed up. If Jake presents the plan to Julie to get out Dee, let's just say like, oh, I can use my idol. We could blindside Dee. She could win if she gets to the end. Julie could say, you know what? Let's go for Austin instead. Or if Julie doesn't want Dee to go and knows that that's happening, she could easily go right back to Dee and be like, hey, Jake has an idol and he's trying to get you out tonight. I think he's gonna give me the idol. And then they could literally just like vote Jake instead if he gives the idol to Julie. Or like if that's a 4 together and let's say Jake kind of does what he did remember what Jake did last week where he said to Katurah, do not let Dee know about this because we cannot make it seem like it's Dee's move. It needs to be our move. And then Katurah immediately runs to Dee.
That was great.
I almost see a scenario here where like, all right, maybe Jake is afraid to tell Katurah about a big plan again, keeps it between him and Julie and says, hey, Julie, I'm going to play this idol for you. We're going to try to vote out Dee. Like Jake needs a lot of help in order for this to happen. Even like with having the idol, even though the numbers are so low, like they could do so if there's 4 of them together and then Jake's kind of on an island with himself, but Julie knows the plan. They could, basically switch around the votes so that it's basically foolproof and that what they wanted to happen will happen. So it's tough. I'm almost wondering if they know that if Julie really wants D to stay still, and let's say like Jake plays the idol for Julie and Julie knows it's happening, like would it be how funny would that be if like they're like, oh, let's just vote out Jake. We know he's playing the idol for Julie. There's so much that could happen. But again, bottom line, before we get off too much on a tangent, like D going at 5 is very tough. I'm curious to know who you think will end up going at 5. And like, what do you think is going to happen here with Jake's idol and everything in play?
I feel like, well, also the two other quick things is that, like you said, it also is going to depend on what like ammunition's in the game. Like Jake's idol's in the game. I don't think they're going to rehide another idol. I think like every finale in the new era, there's going to be a challenge in the first few minutes to give you an advantage at the immunity challenge. I think that's what's going to happen again. I really doubt they're going to hide an extra idol. I think Jake found what was intended to be the last idol of the game. Right. So Austin's not getting saved by an idol, because if Jake plays the idol, it's going to be either on himself to save Katurah to blindside somebody or to save Julie. He's not, I don't think he's playing it on D or Austin. So Austin can't save himself via an idol. So to your question about who do I think is going to go home next week, I just don't see the Rebas like getting back together without Drew and like trying to gang up on Jake and Katurah, because like, Jake and Katurah seem like really great people to bring to the end. I feel like they're going to still go for each other, meaning Julie against Austin and Austin against Julie. So I feel like Austin is in a lot of trouble at Final 5 if he doesn't win immunity. If he does win immunity, that's where I could see Jake and Katurah trying to get Julie and being like, we have to flip this on D right now or she's going to win. But I would say probably Austin, unless Julie is like that likable Final 5 typical boot. I don't know. But I feel like Austin's in a lot of danger now.
I think Julie is, to me, Julie's most likely to go in 5. I think where big danger zone happens for D is if Julie wins immunity, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's like Julie's safe, right? Jake's idol is just going to be played on himself so he gets through, most likely. Unless there's another target that pops up that he wants to save. Like if Julie wins immunity and Jake has an idol to save himself, then all of a sudden you're likely looking at either D or Austin going home. And again, it's going to depend for D or Austin, whoever goes in that scenario. It's going to depend on basically whatever Julie wants to do. She's going to be the one holding immunity. I think that if she wants Austin to go, then Austin will go. Now, again, I don't know in a situation where Julie wins immunity, what would be Jake's, what would you do if you're Jake in that scenario, right? Julie wins immunity, so you can't play the idol on her, right? Like, what could you do with that idol to make it seem like a bigger move?
So if Julie wins immunity and Jake has his idol, obviously,
I think obviously, like in everybody's mind, the big move that Jake can make is somehow using his idol to get D out of the game, right? Which would probably take it, putting it on Julie, using it on Julie, probably. So if Julie's safe already, right? And you're like, all right, Julie wants the vote to be Austin. We could just vote Austin out of the game right now. But like, I feel like I need to make a big move. Maybe he plays an idol on Austin and then votes at D. Like I don't really know, but like, what would you do if you're Jake and Julie wins immunity?
Well, if Julie wins immunity, what's going to happen is Austin and D are not turning on each other. So Austin and D would come up to him probably and Julie and say, like, hey, shoot, we can't get rid of Julie. And they probably at that point, since they won't turn on each other, Austin and D, they're going to say either let's get rid of Jake or get rid of, obviously, Katurah. And they probably will go to Jake and tell him the plan is Katurah. And they'll go to Katurah and say the plan is Jake. And then since Julie's safe, they'll probably say, hey, Reba, let's get back together and let's decide if we want Jake out or Katurah. In that scenario, if Julie wins immunity, I don't see how Jake doesn't save himself there, because he's going to know if Austin and D are a thing, they're not turning on each other, Julie's safe. I'm not going to risk playing it on Katurah just to kind of put me at risk. I'm just going to save myself and hope I can get the votes against Austin or D in that case. That would be ballsy as hell for Jake to say, in the scenario where Julie wins immunity, to go, you know what? They might go for Katurah instead of me. I'm going to play it on Katurah and then risk going home. But you know what? Jake is kind of like in that Chris Underwood Heidi spot where it's like he feels like he needs to make a big splash to impress the jury. So it wouldn't actually surprise me if Jake is like, you know what? I will risk going home and playing the idol on Katurah here to make sure I can get D out or whatever, because Jake strikes me as that person who wants to make a big splash in front of the jury because he feels like he hasn't done anything yet. And this episode, again, Jake is like that Owen Charlie Brown thing where this week, again, he tried to make a move against Drew. He's trying to make the flip happen, but you could argue Jake didn't really do anything. It really was D and Julie making it happen. So he's got to find some way to increase his winner equity with the jury. So I feel like he'll save himself in case Julie wins immunity. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he plays it on Katurah or somebody to really try to make a big splash.
Yeah. I think ultimately, like, not only having to do with Jake's edit about him just striking out every time he tries to make a big move, but like, I think just basically just us on talking this out for 5 minutes, it would take a lot for Jake to play this idol correctly to the point where it shakes up the game. I think that even though it seems like an obvious thing that could happen, I think that if you really, dive in and think about the scenarios, it's tough. It's going to be tough for him. So I am curious to see what happens with that. But that is certainly a wrinkle that I did not see coming. I did not think that Jake would be the one sitting here with an idol at Final Five.
Yeah. Well, and that was a funny scene too, by the way. I was talking to my friends and I was saying, like, Jake hasn't been a major player in the game, but he's been such a fun character. His confessionals are great. He's been so fun to watch. Because he really is like that likable underdog. And maybe it's the Boston accent that's also kind of helping with it. But I think Jake's been really fun to watch. Dylan, my other quick question to you before we dive into some other things is, like, we are talking this whole time, 20 minutes in, we're just assuming by default, whether it's like him being head over heels or whatever, like, we're assuming Austin's not flipping on D at all. Because you can make the argument, a rational player will be like, not only did I help you last week by giving you the heads up that Julie was going to be the target and she saves herself. Now you claim, D, that you didn't tell her, but what I think you told her, not only did I give you that courtesy, you then lied to me about that you didn't tell her. You lied to me about it. And then you didn't tell me Drew was in danger. So a rational player would be like, that's twice in one episode cycle. You basically lied to me. I can't trust you. But because of the relationship, we feel like Austin's just so in love with her. Like, so do we feel like there's no scenario where Austin is mad at D and he'll get over it?
Tough to say. My prediction is that based on what we've seen from D's social game so far, I'm going to say that there is minimal chance that Austin turns on her going forward. And I think that this is very simple. Like, D could literally say, like, okay, let's talk, whatever. They go to talk. D could be like, hey, this plan came together last second. Yeah. I didn't want to overcomplicate things. And ultimately, like, I think this is better she could sell it as like a move that she thinks is better for both of their games. I think that's like the way that I would, she could literally go back to him and be like, hey, like, Drew had thrown out turning on you on Final Five. I was, I think that, going forward, it was better for both of our games. But again, this plan came together last second. I didn't have time to go to you and explain this whole scenario to you and why I think it's better than both of our games. So I just decided not to tell you. But, I made this move and I really think it's better for both of us going forward. And I think that's how you sell it. You sell it as a move that was made for both of you, but like, you couldn't tell him in time because the move came together last second. It would have been too much too soon. So I think that's kind of how you sell it. And I think that Austin just will fall right for it.
Yeah, people like Adam Klein, like, people have talked about this before, where you use the time as a strategy before tribal to like tell people last minute so they can't scramble in time. But like, you're right, D, if she wanted to kind of save herself next week, and then we're gonna get the classic scene after tribal council where Austin's gonna come back to camp blindsided. He's gonna say to her what happened, and you're right, she could say, I'm doing this for us. She could also, and D's very good, so I would not put this past her. I could see her saying, like, look, everybody knows you have an idol, Austin. If I had told you last minute that Drew was in danger and you were going to save him, and you like somehow let him know about it, that word could have gotten back around and people would have targeted you instead, and not only burned your idol, but gotten you out. And I was trying to save you as well. So she could easily spin it in that way. And again, I feel like a really shrewd player would see through it, but I have a sneaking suspicion Austin will be like, D's my girl. I can't turn on her. I wanted to go with Drew, but I'm even more locked in with D now. And it almost might be like an Allison thing in David versus Goliath, where Allison finally went out at the Final Five, but like Nick Wilson was like so indignant every time like Mike White like tricked him, where Nick was like, Allison has to go this week. you might be right, Dylan. It might be a thing where it's like Austin is like, fine, you got rid of Drew, you got me. Julie has to go a final 5. And I could see a scenario where like maybe that does happen and Julie does go out if she doesn't win immunity. But I feel like instead of Austin flipping on D, he'll be like, we have to ride together now no matter what. We can't give Jake Katura and Julie the numbers, and we have to make sure Julie goes home. I see that. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think, again, if I had to predict right now, I think Julie's going to end up going home at 5. I think that she's been a threat for way too long and been kind of sold as the player that we need to get out, the huge threat. I can't see a scenario unless she wins immunity that she stays in the game. I think if she doesn't win immunity, right? Yeah. I think, again, unless Jake plays his idol for her, I don't really, and I don't know if that's really going to happen. Maybe, look, I see Julie going home at 5. I think that, it's the spot for her to go home. I think it's been in the works for a very long time. Not in the works, I should say. Yeah, I guess in the works, I should say. But the writing's been on the wall, I feel like, for Julie for a while now, and she's kind of just been scraping by. She obviously used the idol to save herself. She was a major target again last week. Ends up, not going home. I think this is the week that if she doesn't win immunity, I think, I think Jake is going to see Julie ultimately as a bigger threat than D right now. And that's the thing. So if Julie doesn't win immunity, I think his big move is going to be, I voted Julie out of the game. This was my move. This is my move. I think that's what he's going to try to sell. So yeah, I think that, Julie needs to win immunity to stay alive. Now, if Julie does win immunity and get through to the Final Four fire making, I think that she has probably, I think ultimately, no matter what, if we're looking at the 5 left, I think Julie is the second best chance to win right now, right? If she gets past into the Final Four and she goes to fire or wins Final Four immunity, obviously, if she gets past this vote, then her chances, I think, are pretty high to get to the Final 3. If she gets to the Final 3 with anybody not D, then she has it locked up, I think. If she goes with D, then I think maybe it ends close, but I think D probably edges her out in the end. But I think that she probably has the second best chance to win. That being said, I think that kind of because of that, I think the writing's on the wall for her at 5.
So also, by the way, the thing that we haven't, we kind of said it, but we didn't really dive into it. Like with D, whoever wins immunity, whether it's her, Austin, Julie, Jake Katura, D's target at the Final 5, I just realized her Final 5 target has to be Jake or Katura. Because if you're D, you want both your number 1s in the Final 4 immunity challenge, because you basically then have a 75% chance of getting to Final 3, because you're going to bring yourself, like most people would, not if you're Heidi or Chris Underwood, but you're going to bring yourself. Austin would bring you, and Julie would bring you. So D's, no matter who wins immunity, D's target will be either Jake or Katura. Now, we will see if Jake or Katura can pull in Julie, target the showmance, and then maybe that's how Austin or D are in trouble. But D has gotten her way every week. I don't see any reason why D wouldn't get her way again. And she's going to target either Jake or Katura. My gut feeling, if I had to guess, is she's going to target Jake. Now, Jake and Katura both have not done a lot in the game to warrant jury threats. But I feel like when you mentioned that really funny clip where Jake says to Katura, "Don't tell D," and then she runs immediately to D. I feel like D and Katura seem a bit closer than D and Jake. So I could see her targeting Jake, and that's why Jake might play his idol. But if you're D, you cannot let Austin or Julie go home at Final 5, because that only further increases your chances of making it to the final tribal. If
are you sure that D's gonna think that way though? I feel like D would cut Julie at Final 5 personally. I think again at the end of the day, I think it comes a time where you have to do it if she's the biggest threat, even though it would, if D ends up voting at Julie at 5, what an absolute cutthroat game she had played. But I think you have to do it, right? Everyone is sitting there saying, if Julie gets the end, she's going to win. If Julie gets the end, she's going to win. Could you risk bringing that to the Final 3 with you? I think that deep down inside, and again, who knows what D's Final 3 is, but I know for sure she wants Austin there. I think that her plan is to go with Austin and then one of Jake and Katurah. I think she is planning on cutting off Julie at this point. So I somewhat disagree with what you're saying. Like
Okay.
you think that the target has to be Jake or Katurah because
If you're D,
if you're D, because then Julie or Austin could potentially bring you to the end. But does that just because I think Austin would bring D, right? Out of everybody left, I don't think anybody brings D to the final except for Austin. So
you think Julie is also cutthroat work because D literally saved her life. You don't think Julie would do?
I think if it got to a Final Four scenario where Julie had to choose who was gonna go to the fire and who was gonna go to the final, I don't think that Julie is bringing D. I think Julie would go up to D and say, "I know that you need to be. I know, but my best chance to win is with you out of the game. Go practice fire." I think that's what would happen. So, I think in D's mind, she probably is thinking, you know what? Julie has shielded me enough at this point. If I get through to Final Four, then there's no more votes left. It's basically up to whoever decides. I think that, unless, and I think her thought is like, basically, if the other two people win, not me or Austin, then I have a good chance of going the fire anyway. So I think her move would just be to get out the biggest threat at that point. Which would be Julie. So again, I don't know. Like, I don't really see a scenario where Drew or Julie would be bitter at D at the end and be like, "You played us. We thought we were Reba strong. We thought we were going to the end together, and then you cut me off." I think that they would respect it, right? They played the entire game together, and I feel like the Rebas are voting for the Rebas at the end. So again, I think D personally, I think D will want to vote out Julie at 5. That's my thought.
The Rebas are going to vote for the Rebas, but I think again, kind of like heroes versus villains, the heroes had the majority on the jury. The Bellows are going to have the majority on the jury. So it might come down to what they want to do. Now, I'm not saying it's that clear where it's going to be, they're going to vote along tribe lines. I'm not saying that, but like Caleb, Kelly, Kendra, Bruce, those Bellow people plus Caleb have gotten, pretty close. And I feel like they're going to have the majority on the jury and they're going to choose who wins. I feel like they would still choose a Reba over Bellow because they've played a better game, but you never know. I think it would take a big move from Jake or Katurah to win the game. And I think that's unfortunate because, Jeff and everyone in this new era is like, probably ever since Cambodia, people have been like, you need a big move to win. Obviously, Rick Devens was huge in terms of like making a show in front of the jury. But I really feel like, and Jeff also loves big moves. Jeff loves big moves. But we always talk about Dylan, offline, like it's the little moves that matter a lot. Like, Devin Pinto writing Dr. Mike's name down in Final Five to save himself. Like, it's the little moves that are so impactful that no one gives credit for. And I feel like D, honestly, yes, she can say that she got her target out every week. But I think D even mentioning like her little moves to the jury gets her so much props. Like if G sits there with Julie, yeah, everyone's like Mama J, Julie's going to win. She's so likable. But D, unlike Omer and like Jesse and, Ricard, is like, she's playing a really strong game, but no one's looking at her. If she's able to get in front of the jury and be like, I was doing so many things intentionally to set myself up to get here, their minds are going to be blown. Like imagine the jury hearing like, so I wrote Julie's name down like you guys all saw when she played her idol. I did that intentionally. We were fake fighting. I did that because that would keep me in the loop going forward. And that's how I knew about the plan to get rid of Drew. Like it's the little things like that, which I think people are going to be so caught off guard. Like I had no idea that D was doing this much. So I feel like when you say, oh, Julie may want to cut D, I feel like D doesn't necessarily have to cut Julie at 5 because I feel like D can articulate her game well enough where D can beat anybody, honestly.
Yeah. I think if D gets to the end, she's winning no matter what. Final 3. But obviously I think at the end you want to maximize your chances, right? If you go with Austin, if D goes with Austin and Katurah or Austin and Jake, it may legitimately be a sweep in the final. So it's like, would you rather that or would you rather take the risk of, Julie maybe pulling in a few votes here, having a compelling case, people like her more? Like I don't know. So I think it is a tough choice. But you know what let's do right now? So if you had to rank from 1 to 5, who do you think has the best chance to win Let's hear it, 1 to 5, and then we could go through like each player's chances and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun exercise to also see, like, what would
Like
their
each
argument be.
player's path. What is this like? We'll go through our power rankings or kind
Sure.
of like best chance to win, and then we'll discuss each player,
Sure.
what they have to do in order to win the game.
So before I go into the path, just like the top 5 right now.
Right, top 5.
D for sure, then Julie, then Austin. I'll put Jake at 4 because Jake has an idol, so he can actually still do something. And then Katurah. You could easily convince me to flip 4 and 5, and I'd be okay with it. But I would say it's like, in terms of tiers, it's D up here, drop a tier Julie, drop another tier Austin, drop another tier then Jake and Katurah. Like, that's my chances right now.
I think right now I would say D1, Julie 2.
Yeah.
I think I'm putting Jake at 3 because I feel like that he has a chance to make a big move, whereas Austin, again, we could discuss paths, but I think Austin has less of a path to victory than Jake does. And then I'm going to go with Katurah 5. But, we've kind of already discussed, like, what does Dee need to do to get to the end? She needs to make sure she doesn't get idled out of the game at 5, and then make sure that she can either make fire or wins the Final Four immunity. It's basically simple. If Dee sits there at the end, she's going to win, right? That's what we all believe. That being said, and again, we kind of went through Julie also. Like, Julie, what does she need to do in order to get to the end? She needs to, again, she could win Final 5 immunity and then get to fire, win that, or just win Final Four immunity. She could also, be a major piece in a big move with Jake and, maybe idle Austin out of the game like that. So I think that's her path, right? Her path is to that's her path, right? She could also, I don't know, maybe you're right, and maybe Dee doesn't want to get out Julie, and then it's much easier for Julie to get there. But I think, it's more interesting, like, what is the path to an Austin win? Austin was 3 in your power rankings. Austin was 4 in mine. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on how.
I think if Austin, I don't think he's going to want to go against Dee, even though Dee lied to him twice and Dee really set herself up really good here. Austin could be cutthroat because I think he has that type of skill as a player. I mean, looking at Austin, he is someone that we were very high on in the preseason, was somebody that I considered taking in my draft. Maybe should have taken him instead of Jake, but I digress. But I think he has the potential. I just don't think he saw a relationship happening, and that's what's like clouding his judgment. Because if he can somehow cut Dee and get rid of Julie, him sitting next to Jake and Katurah, I think Austin wins that game very easily. If he's next to Julie, the jury seems to have a lot more respect for Julie, and the jury seems to have more respect for Dee. So if Jake also wants to win, his path is somehow, whether he does it himself or he gets others to do it for him, get rid of Dee and Julie at 4 and 5 respectively, and then bring Jake and Katurah. Could Austin make a big move against one of Dee and Julie and then sit there with one of them and win? It's possible. He has a better chance of beating Julie, I feel like, than Dee. If it's Julie, Austin, and one of the Bellows, he could. But I feel like Austin, and I hate to say it, and because I don't want to compare things, because I know we've compared Jake to Owen a lot, is Austin kind of like Xander in a way? Because obviously very likable, athletic guys, both had an idol, but the idols amounted to almost nothing. And everyone knew Xander had an idol, and they didn't give him any respect. Xander got 0 votes. Austin, by the way, no one ever wrote Xander's name down. And I think that's a mark of a great player as well, if you can avoid your name being written down. To do a quick tally for people, Jake's name has been written down a lot, like 6-7 times. Julie's name has been written down like 6-7 times. Austin and Katurah have not had their name down written once. They are at 0. Dee's also at technically 0. She only got 1 vote from Sean when Sean basically quits, so I don't really count that. So other than that one throwaway Sean vote, Austin, Dee, and Katurah are all at 0 votes. So actually good for Katurah as well that she's not gotten voted for. But like, I feel like that's a mark of a great player, that Dee has done so well. Her name's not been written down once. Same for Julie and Austin. So that being said, I feel like Austin's in that Xander spot where unless he does something crazy or something to really change the perception, because everyone knows Austin had an idol the whole game, I'm actually afraid for him that he could be in that Xander spot.
Right. So that's why I have him at 4, right? I think
Right.
that it's going to be near impossible for him to recover from what happened to him. He had 2 idols, right? Everybody is going to eventually find out that he gave his idol away to Julie. I'm sure Drew told them all.
Yeah.
He's gonna, everyone's gonna know that he had 2 idols at a point. He was the most powerful player in the game. He was at a time playing probably the best game. Again, has not gotten a single vote, so he's played great socially, was in position with the Reba before. Again, had the 2 most powerful things in the game, and they amounted to nothing. In fact, he gave one of his allies an idol that she played to save herself. One of his former allies that eventually that he happened to be going against in that tribal council, and he could not get her. Yeah, he could not get her out. He cannot get her out because he gave her his own idol. So, that is a bad look. And then I think it's a bad look as well to be on the outs of the Drew vote, right? He plays his idol for himself and then is on the wrong side of the votes there. So I've kind of got a sense for a few votes now that maybe Austin was valued by the rest of the cast and jury as like the 4th of the Reba 4. Whereas I think that we've kind of had the perception for a lot of the game that he was 1 or 2. And I think now if we look at it, he may have been valued as like the 4th guy. Because again, he's got 0 votes, but like nobody has even kind of brought his name up recently, except for Julie that one time. And I think it was just like an edited type thing,
Mm-hmm.
So I think at this point, the jury's looking at Austin saying, wow, you had 2 idols. You really screwed that up badly.
Yeah.
D is playing you so badly. Like, he told D that information about the Julie vote, and then the same exact situation happens to him, and he doesn't get told the information. It looks very bad for him right now. So what does Austin need to do to win? In my opinion,
take out D.
The only way that he could win is turning on D and being like, all right, I got caught in this relationship. It was stupid of me. You're gone now. The odds I think of that happening probably close to 0. so that's why I have him at 4. He would have to probably blindside D at 5, and then would have to like get out Julie some way at 4, which would probably take either winning immunity and putting her into fire or beating her in fire himself. So yeah, that's his. I don't want to say drawing dead because he's not drawing dead, because I do think that if he goes with Jake and Katurah, he has a chance. But it's not looking great for him right now. Which why I have him at 4. Now, if you look at Jake and you're like, all right, what's Jake's path to victory? At least he has the idol, right? So I think Jake more easily could make that big move on D than Austin. I don't want to say he more easily could do it than Austin, because Austin could do it if he wanted to. I think the likely chance of Jake making the big move on D is greater than Austin making the big move that he has to on D, and therefore Jake I have ahead of him. Now, ultimately, I think Jake's big move is going to be getting out Julie, which is why D is playing such a great game. But yeah, I think that on the off chance that Jake does idol out D, then because he has the idol, I put him ahead of Austin. I think that if Austin is sitting next to Jake and Katurah, the more likelihood is that it's because of Jake's doing than because of Austin's doing, if that makes sense. So that's why I have Jake ahead. Now, do you want to talk about anything else with Jake, or?
Yeah, I'll say one quick thing on Jake, and then we can get to Katurah, because I feel like, and again, in a post-Gabler world, I can't say anyone's drawing dead, so I can make the argument for anybody, really, if I needed to. But no, Jake, the reason why I had Jake at 4 below, and that was our one difference, was basically because, yes, Jake has more potential to switch up the game than Austin right now because of the idol. I just worry that it's too little too late for him. And again, Chris Underwood taught us that it's never too little too late. But like Heidi last season did the ballsiest thing she could do, and it got her 1 vote. Sometimes it's just a little too late to do anything. Jam Jam had already locked up the jury. There was nothing Heidi could do at that point, really. So it's like, because I think even if Heidi took out Jam Jam, Carson would have won. So Heidi at that point had essentially lost the game. At some point in the game, you run out of runway where you can't do anything. And I fear for Jake. Yes, he could use the idol. I mean, if he takes out D and then takes out, if Jake goes full Underwood, uses the idol, takes out D, wins immunity, takes it off, cuts Julie, I think he wins. But unless that exact scenario happens, I fear that Jake just has been seen as the Owen. And then, by the way, this group has seen all of 43. They haven't seen all of 44, but they saw Gabler, Cassidy, Owen. They saw Owen kind of get like dragged to the end. I fear they're going to be like, Jake, you never had control. You tried to make a tie vote happen twice with Caleb, then with Drew. You never were in control of either. At the Kelly vote, his whole tribe voted for him to sacrifice him, and then Kelly went home. They were willing to get rid of him, not even Ariba. I worry that they're going to say, Jake, we like you. You're a fun guy. You're likable. You really had no agency in the game. So again, I think to your point, why I have him at 4 versus you at 3, if he does a certain scenario, I could see him winning. If he doesn't do that scenario, I just don't think the jury gives him respect.
Yeah, I think that's a scenario. He has to idle out D and then put himself into fire, probably to take out Julie, and then I think he's in a good spot. But yeah, I think that again, we're on the same page mostly. I just think the reason I haven't ranked ahead of Austin is I just don't see Austin turning on D, and I think that's going to be a major roadblock for the rest of the people that are playing Survivor right now. All right, Katurah, we both have at 5. I don't really know what you have to do in order to win. It probably involves, like, again, taking out D and then maybe beating Julian Fire. And then even so, she sits at the end and it's like, because she doesn't have the idol, it's like if she takes out D, like, yeah, she could have taken out D, but it's probably going to be viewed as like other people's vote as well.
Yeah.
Whereas if Jake does it, then maybe it's because he does it with the idol. And then that's why I kind of think I don't want to use the term drawing dead, but I do feel like Katurah is as close as you could get to that.
So let me see if I can make the case. Let me put my lawyer hat on and see if I can make the case. And by the way, I don't think this is going to happen, but I would love to see a Jake, Julie, Katurah final 3. In all lawyer final 3. Jake's like, I'm the baby lawyer. I'm the new lawyer here. Katurah pulls off the mask. I'm a lawyer. Julie pulls off the mask. I'm a lawyer. You have to vote for a lawyer. I'm actually rooting for an all lawyer. I mean, I want D to win, of course, as the best player, but my second hope is an all lawyer final 3. The case for Katurah, and I do think if she sits next to D, she's not going to win. So if she's next to Austin and Jake, or Jake and Julie, or Julie and Austin, what's her pitch? Her pitch, and I think she's well liked, other than her and Bruce having the little arguments. I think the women like her. I think Kelly likes her. I think Kendra likes her. Dee certainly likes her. If you're Katurah, your argument, and this is what me and your brother were, talking about in our group chat, and how like with Sandra, I do think Katurah is playing a Sandra type game where Katurah has really always been about Bruce, but like anybody but me. People bring her a name. Kendra says to her, I think D has to go. She immediately runs back to the Rebas. Jake tells her, don't tell D. She immediately runs back and tells D the Drew plan. Now, people might not respect that game, like that floater game, the rat floater game, whatever you want to call it. But Katurah can say, my name was never written down. I was always in a spot where I was never being targeted. I was floating with the Rebas because they had the majority. I had no reason to stick my neck out for the Bellows. And my argument is basically that anybody but me, I did what I could to survive. I was never targeted. And if imagining D's not there, it's like, what has Austin done to control a vote? What has Jake done to control anything? I'm somebody where Jake had to fight for his life. I never had to fight for my life. Austin saved himself with immunities. I never needed immunity. Like, that's the case that she can make, that she's basically always set herself up where her name was never going to be written down. And all you need in this jury is 4 votes. It's an 8-person jury, but if the vote gets fractured, you could have like a 4-3-1 or like a 4-2-2. Like, she only really needs 4 votes. If she can get the women, she can do it. I'm making, again, I think it's low odds. I think we agree that she's 5 on our totem pole here, but I'm making the case, like, in a Gabler, post-Gabler world, like, what could she do to win? Anybody but me is certainly something that she could use to promote a game.
I guess she could also make a case like Caleb was the biggest threat, and like I was kind of the reason why he went home. Like,
sure.
like that could be a move. But then, like, again, I think she'd kind of get called out, like, like by the Reba, like, no, we made that move. You just went with us. Like, it's tough. But I think you make a lot of good points with Katurah. But yeah, I think she's definitely 5 in my opinion. Now, we've kind of gone through a lot of different things with the finale. I did something that I've actually never done before after this episode, and I wanted to go back and reread some of the cast bios from preseason because I was just curious about certain things. And I think when talking about finales, season 43 has literally scarred people's perception of like predicting finales and stuff, right? Because it's like last season, right? We pretty much called to a T what was going to happen in the finale, except for like Heidi coming in second over Carolyn. Like we didn't think that was going to happen.
No.
But like to me, like not every I think we all thought, if you go back to season 44, we all thought Carson was going to go to fire and probably be the fallen angel. Everyone the entire season was talking about Carson fire at 4, Carson fire at 4. And Jam Jam winning, I think we thought that was going to happen. Everything ends up happening. But then season 43, if you look back to that, everybody was wrong pretty much. Everybody was like, Jesse. Jesse's playing the best game of the new era. Jesse could be playing one of the best new player games ever. And then all of a sudden he loses to Gabler at fire, and everyone's like, what's going to happen now? And then you're like, oh, that's why Gabler's been saying he's been hiding in plain sight this entire season. We've been hearing it over and over and over again. Gabler's the winner of the season.
Yeah.
You want to know who Dee compared herself to?
Yeah, that's why I'm laughing, because I went back to my preseason notes, but go ahead.
Dee compared herself to Jessie when she got asked who she's most like, and then went on to say, but I think I'm going to play like Tony, which probably caused both me and you to be like, we're out on her preseason. So I don't want to it's not even an overthink. It just would be ironic if she compares herself to Jessie and ends up going out at 4, like right before potentially playing an unbelievable winning game. So I thought that was insanely interesting. That being said, I think that this ultimately is probably going to go the path of 44, where I feel like what a lot of people expect to happen is probably going to happen. I think that if I had to make a prediction right now, and again, we did our power rankings, but if I had to make a prediction right now, official prediction for the finale, I'm going to say that Julie goes out at 5. I think that Dee or Austin win final immunity. And I think if Austin wins final immunity, he for sure brings Dee. If Dee wins final immunity, I think she 90% brings Austin. So I'm going to say that they bring each other, right? And then I'm going to say Jake and Katurah go off and fire. And then I'm going to probably say Jake wins. Now, we were waiting all season for the quote unquote hint of who's going to, go to fire. 2 things I've picked up on so far. We were talking about it last week. They did have that scene where Jake and Katurah were practicing fire. So ultimately that's what I think it's going to be. I think that may have been a foreshadowing. Julie also had a big Carson moment last week where she was staring at the fire and it was like in her glasses, kind of like Carson's was, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I'm more inclined to say that Jake and Katurah go against each other in fire. I think Dee goes with Jake and Austin to the final 3. And I think Dee's probably a unanimous winner in that scenario. Maybe Austin Dee's unanimous winner in that scenario. If you listen to, I don't know if you listened to Drew's exit interview at all.
I did, yeah.
With Rob Cesternino, but some of his answers were actually very funny. He said, Rob asked him how much of an impact did Dee and Austin's relationship have on your game? And he paused for a second. He's like, monumental. So I think even if Drew gets to vote between Dee and Austin, and maybe people think Drew would be the one vote for Austin. I think at this point he'd probably realize everything that happens and be like, Dee deserves to win over Austin. I think that if Dee gets to that final tribal council with Austin and Jake that she will win unanimously. But let's hear what your thoughts are on what you think will happen.
Yeah, I think just like last season, I mean, I agree with you for the most part. I almost want to give you a different prediction just to kind of make it interesting rather than us saying the same exact thing. Because I do think there's a great chance Julie does go out of 5 here, just like the perpetual target that finally falls. So I could easily see her going out of 5. I'll keep it interesting and say because of Jake's idol and because of Katurah using the helicopter ride to kind of drive that wedge in between Julie and Dee, like, hey, they have a relationship. I'll say Austin, because of his mistakes, goes out of 5, even though I think Julie will go out. But I'll say I think Austin goes out of 5. Then I could see a scenario where, who goes out? I mean, this is why I hate Final Four Fire, because it just makes it so hard to predict what's going to happen. I wish it was like a Final Four vote. I guess I could see people bringing Dee to the end, and then like, unless Dee wins Fire, maybe I see a scenario where, you know what, this could be like a Romeo thing or like a Heidi thing where no one saw that winner coming in the Final Four challenge. So maybe I'll say Katurah wins Final Four immunity if it's like Samotion. So maybe Katurah wins Final Four immunity. She brings Jake, making Dee and Julie the new Tony and Sarah going against each other in Fire. Dee has to beat Julie in Fire, and then Dee sweeps Katurah and Jake. I'll say that's my prediction, but I could see your scenario happening as well.
That would be something if Julie and Dee face off in Fire. That would be wild.
The other reason why I was laughing, Dylan, is because you inspired me to quickly go back to my notes preseason when you mentioned the Jesse thing. And you're right, there was some really big things here that we mentioned in our preseason coverage, and I wanted to just quickly share, like for just 2 seconds, what I had, because you're right, the Jesse comparison is amazing, and also that I'll play more like Tony. That's D to a T right now. In my preseason notes, I had Austin say he identifies with Owen the most. So I don't know if that's a bad sign for Austin. And also,
I saw that also. That's hilarious.
Austin also said in the preseason, I had a crush on Michelle. So
yeah.
That time.
Unbelievable.
And then he says, what do you want in an alliance partner? Laughter is the key to my heart. So if someone is fun to hang out with and laughs at me, we're gonna be best buddies. So we should have known
this
is gonna happen. So that's Austin and Dee. Let me really quickly go to Jake and Julie. Jake says he'll play like Wendell. I don't think that happened. One more thing that was funny about Dee's preseason coverage. In preseason Ponderosa, the person who gave her red flags was Drew.
Interesting.
So that's very funny. Jake, I don't think had a lot of like funny things here, because he was like, I want to work with Bruce, I want to work with Katurah, so that doesn't surprise me that much. The Wendell thing was surprising. Nothing crazy from Jake. Julie wants to align with the strongest players preseason, so obviously aligning with Austin and Drew worked out for her. And she could see herself playing like Cirie, also a little bit like Jesse. Nothing too crazy there. And then the last one, Katurah, she wants to be in an alliance with quieter people and wants a public/private alliance. Thinks she'll play like a mix of Natalie and Spencer. So, I mean,
interesting that Julie, not to really compare, but I mean, I guess to compare, but like, it is interesting that she wanted to play a Cirie type game, and like her downfall in the game could end up being getting voted out because she is like the lovable mom of the group.
Yeah.
You know? Right. That is interesting. Yeah. I will say before we head off, my other thoughts is like, again, I've been a huge fan of the season. I think that I'll be vocal about it. I think that it's not only the best new era season, but if you like compare again, if you just like if Dee were to win, we were talking about already, compare back to some of the 30 seasons, and me and you and my brother kind of did this exercise, and we could do it like on actual podcast, like postseason.
Yeah.
But if you take this season and run it against a lot of the 30s, like I'm probably I'm taking 45 in a lot of situations. I think this has been a really good season. I think they finally like stuck the landing with the new era. Like they finally figured it out. Again, we'll see how 46 ends up, but this has been a great season. I think we get a lot of players on the season returning in the future. And the other thing is I am full on rooting for Dee to win, because we've been saying for so long on this podcast that Survivor is in dire need of a new dominant winner. Jam Jam was a great winner. I don't know if I would call him dominant. Gabler, certainly not. Marianne, definitely not. Erica, definitely not. We have been in need of a dominant winner. I think we could potentially get it here. So I'm rooting for D to win, and we'll see what happens.
Dylan, quick thoughts as well. I'm also rooting for D to win. I would love to see another dominant winner. And I think that's why the season's been so great and why we not only say it's the best of the new era, but we would put it up in the ranks of like in the 30s. I'm saying like in the 30s to 40s, like one of the better seasons in that last stretch, probably like in the middle of them or like upper middle of them, because I think of the 90-minute episodes. I think this is the best change Survivor has had in years. I hate to say it, like D's playing a great game, and maybe in a 1 hour a week season, we would have seen D. There's also a great chance D would have been seen less, and we're like, why is D, like, why isn't Austin winning? Why is D not getting, like D's not doing that much? We probably are seeing a lot more of D because of the 90 minutes. So I think her dominant winner edit is also thanks to that. So 90 minutes was a great thing for the show. Then, and we can go into this next week with the finale, of course, but then bringing back a lot of classic elements made this a great season. Some really not so fun things like the quits and some twists, but overall has been a very, very fun season, Dylan. Most fun I've had recording a podcast about the new era in a while. So very fun.
Yes, for sure. Looking forward to Wednesday. TBD on, I guess, when we'll podcast that, but we will let everybody know on our new Twitter. But yeah. All right. If you want to take it away, Ryan.
Yeah, for the second to last time this season, before we crown a winner of Survivor 45, grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.